This is the story of a day that enchanted the world.
We all want to believe in love, and we all want to believe in the fairy tale, and that was what the wedding was.
The crowd were having a whale of a time, and they were going to have an even better day. It was lovely.
With unheard stories.
Then we got a phone call. Prince Charles wasn't happy.
One of the choristers told me that they were given sick bags. There is this nagging feeling in your mind all the time. What happens if somebody is taken ill? What happens if somebody wants to go to the loo?
Charles, he invited all his old flames. There was Camilla, there was Susan George, there was Diana's sister.
Told by those who were there, and with beautifully restored original film of the wedding.
It's quite amazing, isn't it?
This is history as you've never seen it before. This is the wedding of the century.
The Queen presents her son to the people, the 21st Prince of Wales.
From the very beginning, the eyes of the world were on the future king. At home, at school, at work, and in his private life.
Now that he was 31 years of age, great conjecture had already been shown over when and who he was likely to marry. Often it was headline news.
It was almost impossible, I think, for Charles, because he couldn't date anyone without the press descending. Any girl who Charles seemed interested in, even if she was just a friend, she would suddenly get chased by the media. Sabrina Guinness said suddenly she turned up once to meet him, and there were press everywhere. She had no idea how that had happened.
The prince had been romantically linked to a score of eligible women.
For example, Lady Jane Wellesley, who Charles was very fond of and was interested in getting married to, really, she was someone who was completely chased by the press. She couldn't really walk down the street without them following her and photographing her. The reality of being chased by the press, of being doorstopped, of their family being watched, of their friends being watched, this was too much for them. And really, I think many of them felt that this wasn't a price they wanted to pay.
As the royal family pose on the steps of St. Paul's, the burning question in every loyal heart is, when will the prince marry? Rumours were rife, but the prince kept the nation guessing.
Fleet Street newspapers were privy to these rumours, and photographer Kent Gavin was one of the first to hear about Charles's latest romance.
I've covered major news events in showbiz for the Daily Mirror. When the rumours started going around that there might be a young lady down in Chelsea, Knightsbridge, called Diana Spencer, that could be the future Queen of England.
Diana, she starts to date Charles, and the royal family really leap on it because they are desperate for Charles to get married. He's left it quite a long time, and all the women his age are really either married or they have what is seen as too much of a past to marry him.
She was 18 years of age, beautiful. You wondered whether it was going to happen or not because of that age difference.
She was aristocratic. Her family had a long history of royal service, so they felt she'd fit in very quickly. She was beautiful, she was young, she was fresh, she was innocent. Really, they thought, she is just perfect. And I think also she was seen as perfect by the press. The minute that they realised that Charles had a new female friend, I mean, that was it.
The editor and the picture editor said, we'd like you to go down and have a look. And I thought then that it was a bit below my pay grade because you had a doorstep. You know, for photographers, that means you stand on a doorstep and just take pictures. Well, I went down there. And I went down a couple of times, and little did I know then that Diana Spencer was going to change my life and career forever.
The Paps had come along as well. They hadn't existed beforehand, but they suddenly, for a good royal picture, you can make a lot of money. They were freelancers, and they had none of the scruples that other photographers had jobs on newspapers had to subscribe to. So it's a bit unfair putting paparazzi and the regular Fleet Street photographers together, because they're not, they're different. But she became the golden girl of the paparazzis, and they were after photographing her all the time.
I had many, many conversations with Diana. She knew the difference between staff photographers and the paparazzis. But she had no idea what this swamp of coverage was going to be like.
Then, on the 24th of February, 1981, from Buckingham Palace came the news that the whole world had been waiting for. The heir to the throne presented his beautiful bride-to-be. Lady Diana Frances Spencer, the third daughter of the 8th Earl Spencer.
It was a fairy tale romance, and that's how we projected it, and that's how we got the story. The newspapers were there to depict them generally in a good light.
The happy couple posed for the press photographers in the palace gardens. The engagement ring is a magnificent sapphire surrounded by diamonds. Prince Charles will be 32 years old and Lady Diana 20 on their wedding day.
Diana was swept up into a storm that was bigger than she ever could have imagined. Everyone wants Charles and Diana to get married, and there's this massive force behind it, and in the midst of it are two people who don't know each other that well. They'd only met each other a handful of times when they actually got engaged. Many of these times where they'd met, Diana had been escorted by her grandmother, and Diana still called him Sir, so she didn't really know him that well.
I think she may have given the royal family the impression that she was a homebodied girl, but she really liked the West End and she liked going out dancing. And she was young. Charles was another generation, really.
I don't think anyone really said to themselves, isn't she a bit young to be getting into the royal family? Isn't there a bit of an age gap between her and her husband? Or hasn't this been rather rushed, the whole courtship and engagement? People didn't stop to think.
When Diana Spencer came on the scene, all newspapers, including the tabloids and the broadsheets, assigned a photographer to be full-time covering Lady Diana Spencer and then Charles, etc. And they had a royal correspondent and a royal photographer. It worked in many ways. She got to know us, we got to know her, Charles got to know us.
Prince Charles takes the salute at Windsor amid the kind of pageantry for which Britain's famous. There'll be a whole lot more, of course, in the prince's wedding. The engagement of the heir to the throne to Lady Diana Spencer ended years of speculation. In the end, the future queen has come from within the English aristocracy. Lady Di has handled the glare of publicity with a natural ease.
Diana's first public engagement, Goldsmiths Hall, and Charles got out and walked into the stairs to go out. He turned to me and said, "Mr. Gavin, I hope you've got your fashion edited today." I said, "I don't think so, sir, but we'd certainly be interested." And of course, that picture was unbelievable. We had no idea what she was going to be wearing. It was sensational. That dress was so low cut. Grace Kelly was one of the guests there, and I think even Grace Kelly was a bit stunned when she saw her. And she was so shy, and she had those beautiful big blue eyes shining out.
The photos of Diana went global, and the princess-to-be was fast becoming the most photographed woman in the world.
The interest was immense in terms of the tabloids. Every time Diana went anywhere, we would be there full time.
She really was something quite new. There'd never been anything like Diana before. She had this extraordinary ability, a love affair with the camera. And he couldn't understand it as well. In fact, he got slightly jealous of her ability to seduce the lens.
Before Diana, the royal family had been seen as respectable and dutiful, but not really very high in the stakes of international glamour, of international celebrity. Diana, she had movie star quality. Once the camera had an eye on her, it was transformative. Shy Di, Lady Di, everyone was fascinated by her.
Diana just captured the imagination of not just myself, but the whole public. Prior to the wedding, there were rehearsals at St Paul's to pick out the slots and places where stands were going to be put out. Everything was well planned for still photographers and television. Being the chief photographer, royal photographer, I had the first choice. I wanted to be in there to witness the wedding. And I went down there on 2 occasions. You needed to check what lenses you were going to need, the lighting. But I was in there, and that's what mattered to me.
As photographers jostled for position at St Paul's, the glare of publicity was a little different from royal engagements and weddings of the past.
In these, the first special studies of the pair since the news of their engagement, it's easy to see the radiant happiness of the princess as she and her very good-looking husband-to-be pose for the cameras in the palace. Pictures marking such an event as this royal engagement would not be complete without focusing for a moment on the diamond and platinum engagement ring. The marriage of the heiress presumptive is naturally a matter of great importance for the future of the Commonwealth. We are conscious of that, and we may feel certain she has made a choice with her head as well as her heart.
Royal weddings are used to create patriotism, they're used to create affection for the royal family.
The day of the wedding, and immense crowds. Thousands had assembled overnight, others had arrived at dawn, all eagerly waiting to see and to cheer the royal processions on this day of their own princess's marriage. The crowds waited with tense excitement for the appearance of the Irish stagecoach, for His Majesty the King, and for the bride.
The idea of the big public white royal wedding goes back to Victoria. Before Queen Victoria, royal weddings were quiet affairs late at night, a few aristocratic friends. But Victoria and her government wanted to really proclaim her as the middle-class queen. And so what happened was she'd have a much bigger wedding for which the crowds could line up and watch her drive to the wedding venue publicly, and they could see her.
The greyness of this November day, matching in some respects the weary aftermath of war, these were neither seen nor felt, for this was a day of national rejoicing.
The wedding of Elizabeth and Philip, she was the future queen, but it was 1947, it was the post-war, it was a recession, there was Great Depression in Britain, and there was a lot of debate about whether or not they should have a royal wedding at all. Winston Churchill actually said that if Elizabeth and Philip had a big wedding, it would be a splash of colour on the hard road we have to travel. That idea that the royal wedding was a big moment, a joyous moment, would give people happiness and would bring people together. Women from all over the country sent in their clothing coupons so that the Queen could buy a wedding dress. But actually, this was against the law. You can't transfer your clothing coupons. So they couldn't accept them, sent them all back, but made the wedding dress from some silk that they did have. Elizabeth and Philip's wedding was a celebration of them, but it also was a celebration that the war was over, that life went on, that weddings were continuing, and this was a new queen for the future.
This day will long be remembered as a vivid and important episode in the story of the nation. The crowds outside the palace were quite as vast and as thrilled as those of Jubilee and coronation days. And how they cheered the happy pair when they came out onto the balcony. The link between the British people and the royal family is something quite unique.
One of the key ingredients of any wedding day is the wedding cake. And in 1981, Royal Navy head baker Dave Avery was about to get a royal appointment that he'd never forget.
Within sight of Portsmouth's most famous landmark, Nelson's Victory, and waiting to begin a new role as anti-submarine helicopter carrier, Her Majesty's ship Bulwark. Attending the recommissioning, His Royal Highness Commander the Prince of Wales.
I met Prince Charles when he was on Bulwark, and they wanted a commissioning cake making. And Prince Charles cut the cake. He pointed to me and he said, "Have you made this? That's a beautiful cake." Right? So I was quite pleased about that. When Mark Phillips married Princess Anne, the army did the cake. So my admiral got in touch with the palace and said it'd be nice if the Navy got the chance to do the wedding cake. I was at the cookery school then as a senior bakery instructor, teaching baking to the boys. I got told that I was doing the wedding cake, but I couldn't say anything to anybody until the press release. You're quite pleased about it at the beginning, you know, to be picked to make the future King and Queen's wedding cake. You couldn't get a higher honour, could you? But as things went on, I always thought that one day I might get in the tower if anything went wrong. I'd be stuck in the tower.
Luckily, Dave avoided a trip to the tower, but he did have a very special appointment at the palace.
And I met Diana in Buckingham Palace to show her the design. She was so nice because Like I was, well, not petrified, but I was apprehensive of meeting her. But that's what she said to me. I was apprehensive of meeting you, and it's been a pleasure. She said to me, all she wanted was a wedding cake. She didn't want a monument. But when Diane had sent the plan, everything was fine. She was happy about that. Great, no problem. And then we got a phone call. Prince Charles wasn't happy. And we thought, oh, time. But anyhow, what it was is that they used to name him the Red Dragon.
Naval Lieutenant Prince Charles is taking to the air again, this time in a helicopter. As Prince of Wales, he wears the Red Dragon of Wales, and the 12 members of the training unit will wear scarlet and gold arm flashes depicting the dragon.
So I had to put the crest of the Red Dragon on the front of the cake, and that was the only change from everything that I planned.
The cake was made at the Royal Navy Cookery School in Chatham.
What we do then? Everything had got to be secret. It had to be. I had the only key to that kitchen. If it's a big job, a big cake, you always do two, because you never know, and especially if it's travelling, you're doing twice the amount of work of what you could have done. But it had to be right. We made the cake a rich fruit cake, because my mum had a rich fruit cake and it was a cracking recipe. And I used that, but I added bits and pieces. Everything that went in that cake was donated by different companies. And then we was told by the palace that they wanted rum, Navy rum, in the cake. Princess Diana had never tasted Navy rum, so we put Navy rum in it. And that went over weeks. I'd put a little drop in, wrap it up, save it, wrap it up, save it. That's me in the cookery school in the passageway. Just to the left-hand side is the kitchen where I made the royal wedding cake. And you can see how big the bottom tier was. It was a massive cake. The bottom tier took 12 hours to bake. You see me here with a set square and a spirit level, because everything, if you get something like on a cake that's just a millimetre out, by the time you go 5 foot up, it's that much out. So the cake would be falling over. So everything had got to be absolutely spot on.
The Navy mounted a guard on their masterpiece, and a masterpiece it most certainly is.
We finished it the week before. The one that wasn't going to the palace, we stood it up in the cookery school for the press release, which was going to be the next day, where all the newspapers and press and things came down to take pictures of the cake.
They give us lines of what to do, you know. They didn't want nothing like castles and things like this. They wanted a wedding cake.
And yet on the panels there's some very intricate designs, the crests, etc.
Going from the top, the C&D and the doves and the grapes. On the second set you've got the crown, the naval ensign and the cap badge. The third tier is Prince Charles's naval thing, which is his ships and also his squadrons he was on. And then on this second tier is the actual crests. Well, we've got Charles's crest, and then we've got Lady Diana's. But these is where the work's gone in. You know, one of those took 8 hours to paint, and it's icing that's been painted on to the cake.
This morning, the cake was carefully packed in boxes and delivered to Buckingham Palace.
Everything's very fine and delicate on that cake. So if it goes over a bump, icing can split, something can fall off, whatever. And it wasn't until we got to the palace to stand it up that we knew everything was fine. There was 2,500 weight of cake, marzipan and icing being stood up. And it stood in the palace for 3 days before the wedding. This again is me with the royal wedding cake, in black and white, in colour. Quite proud of it, really.
And so he should be. This was a royal wedding like no other, and everybody wanted a slice of the action.
Once the wedding date was announced, it was down to the serious business of the royal wedding industry. Over 2,000 wedding souvenirs have been submitted to the Design Council for approval. Only 60 made the grade. These are the traditional trinkets without which no royal event is considered complete. So far, the royal wedding industry is said to be worth over £500 million.
The run-up to the royal wedding was unprecedented in terms of the amount of merchandise produced. Really, I think it's not an overestimation to suggest that nearly every household in the United Kingdom had some kind of memorabilia of the royal wedding. Everyone wanted a piece of this royal wedding, of the royal romance, and they wanted a piece of Diana. I think we all want to believe in love, and we all want to believe in the fairy tale, and we all want to believe in the fairy tale princess, and that was what the wedding was.
Most royal weddings of the past had been held at Westminster Abbey, including Princess Margaret's wedding to Anthony Armstrong-Jones.
And from Clarence House, the glass coach leaves on its journey to the Abbey. Riding in the coach was the bride, accompanied by Prince Philip, who was to give her away. All along the route, the people waved and cheered Princess Margaret. It was her day. One can be certain that as she drove through the crowded streets, she must have been touched by the affection that surrounded her. The royal bride arrives. Her own sparkling beauty is superbly set off by the simplicity of her wedding gown of white organza. The Queen and members of the royal family have taken their places. The bridegroom, and what a moment for him as his bride enters. The service is begun by the Dean of Westminster.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God and in the face of this congregation to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony.
Choirmaster Barry Rose was as surprised as anyone when he heard of Charles and Diana's chosen wedding venue.
I was sitting at home with my wife, having lunch, and listening to the 1 o'clock news on BBC Radio. And the headline said that the Prince of Wales and Lady Diana Spencer would be married in St Paul's Cathedral. I thought, this can't be right. You know, it's Westminster Abbey. They always go to Westminster Abbey. Nobody had told me, of course. The clergy knew, but they never told the Master of the Choir or anything like that. St Paul's is so famous. When I go around the world, they say, oh, you were at St Paul's Cathedral. They don't say London. They just say St Paul's Cathedral. It is known worldwide. I think Charles chose St Paul's because it's open from end to end. In Westminster Abbey, you have the screen on which the organ sits halfway up. So if you're seated out in what they call the nave, which is the west side of that, you don't see anything when the couple are right at the front and out of sight, whereas you could see the whole thing from the back of the nave of St Paul's.
One reason why St Paul's was chosen was because it was going to be such a televisual wedding, was because actually St Paul's, I think you get slightly better long-term view. You can get a better kind of TV shot of it overall, and I think that's one reason why St Paul's was chosen.
I got to the cathedral that afternoon and the press were everywhere. I mean everywhere. They came to choir practice, they followed us even to the loo. You know, they wanted to film this and film that. Every day from then on, it wasn't just the British press, it was the international press from around the world.
As the happy pair begin their procession, Princess Margaret curtsies gracefully to her sister. And at the bride's special request, the processional music is Purcell's Trumpet, Tune and Airs.
Every royal wedding has music, but it has special music. And Charles turned to a friend of his, Sir David Wilcox, to ask his advice. He'd met Sir David when he was at Cambridge University. First of all, he's the Prince of Wales, and the central piece in the service was a new anthem written by the Professor of Music at University College Wales, which was William Matthias. There were hymns that everybody could sing, and then there were responses written by my colleague at St Paul's. Charles had the say in it. I think he was the musical one, and he actually had played the cello, hadn't he, I believe, and all sorts of things like that. So he certainly had some input into it. The music to be played and sung was published well in advance, but nobody had heard the new piece. We had the new anthem, I should think, about 2 months in advance. We had handwritten copies. It wasn't published until the day itself, so the choir sang from handwritten copies that the composer had written out himself. We learnt that about a month before. We were used to royal occasions. There was quite a big choir. There was about 40 boys and about 24 men. We were all ready for it by the day before. I mean, we had a couple of rehearsals and we'd done the balance test for the television and the radio and all that sort of thing. You are hyped up on these occasions. There was all sorts of excellent levels of excitement because of the press people from all around the world. And the kids had hardly any sleep anyway. But they were on adrenaline kicks in with them, and they come in and they throw a switch and they sing.
And it wasn't just inside St. Paul's that preparations were being made.
The village of Laterton is set in the beautiful part of England. On the wedding day, the villagers will hold a street party. It'll be one of thousands which will take place all over England. They've been working on it for months, raising money in house-to-house collections and in many other activities, including the traditional village jumble sale.
Street parties are such a part of royal weddings, such a part of royal events, that streets get together, neighbours get together who don't actually know each other, who've never spoken before, will club together, put out some trestle tables and have some cake together. It's a moment of real community cohesion and community spirit. And these go right back to the 19th century. You do have celebrations of coronations and weddings happening before the 19th century, but street parties and the idea of ordinary people clubbing together to celebrate the monarchy is particularly a Victorian invention.
But for many, there was little cause for celebration in the summer of 1981.
Despite the gloom of recession, unemployment, riots, and an indifferent English summer, the flags go up for the July celebration. Britain's problems seem a long way away from this quiet hamlet.
The country was riven, absolutely true, between the left, who didn't like the way the country was being run, and you had Thatcher's people who were determined to change it.
July 1981, and English cities burned. The current wave of rioting hasn't been equaled in modern times. The public is shocked, so are the politicians and the police.
In the summer of 1981, there were riots in the United Kingdom, in Toxteth, particularly in Brixton. And really, this was a time when people were very angry at the new regime, deprivation, the fact there was a gap between rich and poor. And so really, I think you have this big desire, investment from the establishment that they want the wedding to be as big as possible, to really overwrite the fact that that's the image that many people would have of the summer of 1981 is riots, burnt out cars, people angry, that instead you get the fairy tale wedding.
But Britain's chronic social and economic ills will have to be cured at source before real peace returns to the streets.
So there was huge division in the country, but in an odd sort of way, it was withdrawn for the royal family.
The wedding between Prince Charles and Lady Diana will be celebrated in many ways. Some will just buy a memento of the occasion. Others will take part in the thousands of street parties. A select few will attend the ceremony at St. Paul's Cathedral. For all, it's hoped it will be a time of unity for a troubled nation.
Love is the flower you've got to let grow, or so the saying goes. And florist David Longman was tasked with creating a bouquet fit for a princess.
They say that flowers in the wedding bouquet show fertility, fidelity, and loyalty. The fashion of carrying flowers, you can put to Queen Victoria. She carried a posy of flowers. My father joined the Worshipful Company of Gardeners. They had the ancient tradition of presenting flowers to the royal family on state occasions. And the first time he was involved was in the wedding of the Queen, then Princess Elizabeth. That's where we started. We made the bouquets for Princess Margaret and several others. My conversations with Lady Diana was very similar to so many discussions I'd had with brides and what they wanted. I showed her the designs. All right, we had many more designs and more intricate designs than we would probably show to a normal bride. We'd talked to the dressmaker beforehand. I'd been to see the dressmaker, although the Emanuels were very discreet and wouldn't tell me very much, which I quite understood. They did give me a patch of material, so I could sort of feel what it was going to be like. But they showed me an outline sketch and I knew it was going to be a very voluminous dress. The outline sketch was a great help. It's a combination of what you know about the dress, the disposition of the bride, her hair, her height, and what she thinks about it. At the end of the day, she is the important one. She's the one who you've got to please, to help make her day the happiest day of her life. She was like any other bride, excited, intrigued, wanting guidance of what she would have. Very normal, very, very normal person, a young bride. I took this book with the designs, various designs which we had put together, showing her what she could have. There's crescents and half crescents and rounds, and she chose this one, which is a long drop bouquet. Lily of the Valley, Stephanotis, orchids. The prince made one request, and that was a Mountbatten rose in memory of his uncle, who he was very attached to. He particularly wanted it, and there was only one grower. It's not really a florist rose, it's a garden rose, and it was the only colour because it's a golden rose, there in the centre of the bouquet. We made a silk mock of what she had chosen. She saw that. The decision obviously was hers, but she listened to our guidance. She was very easy to deal with. She wasn't particularly demanding. She was always charming.
However, Diana did have one particular request for David.
If we look at the photographs of Princess Elizabeth's wedding, you'll see that the big photograph with all the bridesmaids, everyone is carrying a bouquet except the bride. And the story was that the princess asked her bouquet to be put on the tomb of the unknown warriors. Lady Diana, she'd heard this story, so she said, please, can we have 2 bouquets? So they had one which went straight onto the tomb, and the other one, which I delivered to Buckingham Palace, was ready for the photographs. There was a great deal of secrecy. The press get hold of it, and as soon as they know, they want to interview and talk about it and what they're going to do, what the design's going to be. And of course, those things are a secret until the bride walks into the church. Flowers in the cathedral. I suppose we had something like 20 people working on the flowers. I had about 3 or 4 of my very senior florists who were well qualified with the flower ladies of St. Paul's. We put a lot of work and thought into it. For example, just inside the door, floor pillars, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Each one had 25 alstroemeria, 30 stocks, 20 gladioli, 20 lilies, 45 gold roses, 35 white carnations, and white hydrangea, and some white spray chrysanthemums.
That's a lot of flowers.
There's a lot of flowers in each arrangement.
There was an unexpected last glimpse down that famous aisle. Soon the doors were to be firmly shut, but inside work would continue all night. Outside, that red carpet to lay under the watchful eye of a police guard. 100 foot of actually rather modest quality nylon, which is proving rather difficult to lay.
We did a final inspection of the cathedral flowers at about 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I walked to the west door, and you saw all the crowds down the Ludgate Hill. You could see the crowd were having a whale of a time, and they were going to have an even better day. It was lovely, absolutely wonderful.
It just had to be the biggest street party since the coronation, and the nearer you got to St Paul's, the noisier and happier it became. After all, these days you do need an excuse for dancing in the streets. And of course there had to be the dust cart, often greeted with cheers itself as it made its run, as it was to do so many times that night. And sleep many people did, despite the cheery nighttime chatter of a radio DJ coming from loudspeakers right along the route. You couldn't actually see an inch of pavement anywhere, and money wouldn't buy you a space from most of these people.
As dawn broke over London, preparations had been taking place throughout the night to ensure that the big day went off perfectly.
On the morning of the wedding, we was up at 3 o'clock, went to the palace, moved the cake, put it all down, put it back in the boxes, screwed it all up, got a buggy, took it right across the other side of Buckingham Palace, put it up in the gold room for wedding breakfast, and when it came to put the top piece on the flowers, I didn't do that because I couldn't do that. I thought I'd done enough. I was really, just so relieved that the cake had been stood there and we'd moved it and it was all ready for the thing. And my boss, he put the top on the cake for me. And I've never felt such a relief. You can't explain it, the relief that you've finished it and it's done. All you had to do was eat it.
Our head florist started at 4 o'clock in the morning to make the bouquets. We converted my office, the back of our shop where we were, into a workroom for her to work away from the other staff.
At 6 o'clock this morning, the party was still going on, but a trifle more wearily. The crowd had, of course, built up steadily. All the best places had gone, and the losers waited to be moved off the road, hoping someone would let them onto that highly prized pavement. So as the crowd settles down and the tension begins to mount here as much as anywhere, St Paul's is ready and waiting for its big day.
I can remember the morning of the wedding well, because first of all, you've got to get into the cathedral, which is nearly impossible unless you have your duty pass. The choristers arrive by their own entrance from the choir school, and we have a rehearsal, which lasts about 40 minutes or so, just to warm everyone's voices up, and a final sort of team talk, as I call it, before we go up there. And we weren't allowed to practice upstairs, of course, that morning, because people were assembling in the cathedral from about 9:30 onwards, I think.
And it wasn't just the bride and groom who had wedding day nerves.
One of the boys told me quite recently that they were given sick bags. I mean, there is this nagging feeling in your mind all the time. What happens if somebody's taken ill? What happens if somebody wants to go to the loo?
In case you've ever wondered how the Guard of Honour know exactly where to stand, well, here's the man with the chalk who carefully marks each place with a circle and their number.
By the time of the royal wedding, Britain and much of the world was in the grip of dye mania. They were obsessed. All everyone cared about was, what would Diana wear? What would she say? What would she do? Would she kiss Charles on the balcony?
By now, the slightly weary crowd were saving their very loudest cheers for later on. What are you looking forward to most of all?
Seeing Lady Di, I reckon.
You reckon so,
Yeah.
do you? Is that what everybody wants to see, I think?
Yeah, probably,
I'll get
yeah.
out and give her a kiss.
The public, they couldn't get enough. There were thousands of people on the streets, wasn't it? And television-wise, it was one of the biggest viewing audiences ever. It's just Cinderella. It was a fairy tale princess. That's the feeling everybody got, including the media. We had to be in 2 hours before the arrival.
As he waited, Kent noticed some rather familiar faces inside St Paul's.
Charles, all of his relationships were in there. There was Camilla, there was Susan George, there was Diana's sister. I think there were one or two others, well, I can't remember names. But he invited all his old flames.
Prince Charles was a supporting actor. There wasn't much conversation about him or any of members of the royal family. It was all about Diana. People really fell in love with the idea of this wonderful young woman marrying into the royal family. To them, it seemed like the beginning of a wonderful romance, the fairy tale.
She was wearing this extraordinary dress. piling it into the carriage. They were sitting in there as if it was filled up with soap suds. In fact, the carriage was filled up with her dress.
When the gold coach drew up to the cathedral and Diana stepped out and you saw the dress for the first time, that was so exciting.
When they had to get her out of the carriage, they had to arrange it all, so it was all kind of impromptu. You think they have all sorts of rehearsals for this kind of thing, but they couldn't rehearse the dress. I don't think it was actually ready until the morning of the ceremony, and it caused a bit of a problem. Everyone kind of ignored the fact that it was full of creases because everyone wanted it to go off well.
I love the dress. I think it's so romantic. I think it's pure 80s, and I think you had to be young, tall and beautiful to pull it off like Diana, and no one else could. That gigantic train, the longest train of any wedding dress in history.
Had an awful shock because when she saw her get out of the carriage, no bouquet. I thought, my goodness, what's happened this time? What happened? They got her out, they put her dress right, and then the footman went back into the carriage and brought her. I must admit, for 30 seconds, I had a very nasty moment.
Bouquet in hand, Diana entered St. Paul's Cathedral with her father by her side. The eyes of the world looked on as the princess-to-be, in her dress with a 25-foot train, embarked on a 3.5-minute walk down the aisle to meet her prince. Life for Diana would never be the same again.
When she walked in, and the music and everything else, it was just something to see, beautiful. I was witnessing history, and I can say to my kids, well, I wasn't there to do it.
Even the Archbishop of Canterbury talked about the fairy tale. Everything really was the princess vision, the happy ever after vision. It just was such a huge responsibility to lay on the shoulders of Charles, and particularly Diana, that for the rest of her life she'd have to live out our fairy tale fantasies.
I, Diana Francis.
Diana chose not to say that she would obey her husband in her wedding vows, and that was a real break from tradition.
To love and to cherish.
Love and to cherish.
Till death us do part.
Till death us do part.
Diana was showing that even though she was only just 20, she was a young girl who everyone had underestimated. She wasn't going to be the malleable puppet that everyone thought. She wasn't going to obey her husband and vow to. She was going to be her own woman, a modern, independent bride. Charles and Diana's wedding was the biggest televised event in history. I don't think anything will ever beat it. 750 million people sat down to watch the wedding all over the world, and that meant watching at very unsociable times in the middle of the night in some parts of the Commonwealth and some parts of the world. And yet everyone wanted to watch it, even people who weren't very interested in the royal family.
A new piece written by William Matthias, I think it might have been the musical premiere with the biggest audience in the world ever. I mean, I got very excited in one moment. I threw my hands in the air like you do when you're conducting, and the lampshade right next to me flipped off and did a quick twirl, and the clergyman sitting next to me just caught it. So if you look carefully at the photos of that day, you can see there's one lamp with no lampshade left on it. He couldn't have sung any better. I mean, it was the best we could have done. We gave our all, you know, heart and soul. And it was not about us, it was about the two people getting married. That's what weddings are about.
For those who'd spent months working behind the scenes, it was now time to enjoy the moment.
She carried a large bouquet, something like 36 inches long. She was reasonably tall. It was well balanced, and we discussed how she should hold it to get the right perspective. You want to hold it halfway down, which looks much better. It was the most wonderful, moving sight. That's left a wonderful impression on me of that lovely occasion.
Diana's beauty, her freshness, her innocence, her kind heart, and her emotional warmth, all of this came across in the wedding. And the woman who became the most famous woman of the 20th century, the most photographed woman of the 20th century, this all begins in the royal wedding itself.
On the day of the wedding, I was in my office, in the editor's office, waiting for all the pictures to be brought into us because it was a picture-led issue. So we ran down Fetter Lane. They had military bands. So the air was full of music and there was no traffic because it had all been blocked away for the royal procession. There were all people hanging up all the windows. It was fabulous. It was a fabulous day. And they came clattering up and tearing up the street and everyone cheered. And then we ran back up to the office and waited, and then the pictures started coming in, and gradually people started to come into the office who had been covering the story from various places. We saw them on the balcony. They came out, the jet fighters flew over, the crowds cheered, the sun shone, but he wouldn't kiss her. She was there, they were talking, the children were scampering around, the old folks were smiling, and we were chanting, "Kiss her, for Christ's sake, kiss her," because we wanted the kiss picture. And we thought it was never going to happen.
I think there were 40 photographers on the Queen Victoria Memorial, and I think only probably 4, maybe 5 got it because it was all over. And I looked at it and I thought, well, you know, there's history changing.
Royals always came out on a balcony after weddings, but they didn't kiss. Charles and Diana kissed, and really that was the beginning of all of our investment in Charles and Diana as the perfect couple, as the new type of monarchy, and Diana really as the romantic princess of everyone's hearts.
July the 29th, 1981, a day that enchanted the world. And now, thanks to new technology, a day that looks like it was filmed yesterday.
It's like a time machine. We can watch the footage as if we were there, as if we were watching it for the first time, gathered around the TV, being part of this huge moment.
So let's sit back and enjoy, as never before, the wedding of the century.
As if by royal appointment, the weather on the great day is perfect, giving London a touch of summer magic. From Buckingham Palace, a semi-state landau carries the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh to St. Paul's Cathedral for the wedding of their much-loved son, the Prince of Wales. And as the Queen Mother said for all of us, I wouldn't have missed this day for anything. On the steps of St. Paul's, it's a scene straight from a Victorian picture book. The enchanting bridesmaids with wreaths of flowers in their hair, and the page boys, straight and slim, in 19th century sailor suits, all under the firm but pretty eye of Lady Sarah Armstrong-Jones, the chief bridesmaid. The wedding guests assemble, not just the famous like Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and Mrs. Nancy Reagan, wife of the American president, but personal and family friends as well. Also many of the crowned heads of Europe, quite happy for once to play second fiddle. The huge, cheerful crowd that has waited so long and patiently roars and waves its welcome. And now the hero of the hour. Beneath the pomp and titles, a nice, rather nervous young man on the most tender and important journey of his life. Beside him, his brother and chief supporter, Prince Andrew, wondering perhaps if he's forgotten the ring. As Prince Charles sets off for the cathedral, his mother arrives to be greeted, as tradition in the city demands, by the Lord Mayor of London. The Queen Mother, escorted by Prince Edward. Around the 1902 State Landau rides a Prince of Wales escort of the Household Cavalry, gleaming and bright. An escort of mounted police wait for Lady Diana at Clarence House. Though still a commoner, the pretty English girl will be transformed into the third lady of the realm, Princess of Wales. In St. Paul's, the Queen and other members of the royal family make their way past the other 3,000 wedding guests to take their places. The Duke and Duchess of Kent, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, Princess Margaret and Viscount Linley, and Princess Anne with Captain Mark Phillips. The Queen is preceded by the Lord Mayor, bearing the pearl sword presented to the city by Queen Elizabeth I to commemorate the victory over the Armada in 1588. And so the stage is set. And here is the groom, exactly on time, punctuality being the privilege of princes. Prince Charles wears a uniform of Royal Navy Commander, his brother that of midshipman. Passing through Admiralty Arch, the bride is not far behind. At her side, her father, the Earl Spencer. Prince Charles makes his way down the aisle. His supporters, Prince Edward with Prince Andrew, still hoping he hasn't lost the ring. Forswearing the usual privilege of brides, Lady Diana arrives on time as well. The whole day is to be a superb example of precision and timing, so typical of British ceremonial. The world gets its first full glimpse of the fairy tale princess, demure behind her veil, and the wedding dress that has been a carefully guarded secret, resplendent ivory silk taffeta trimmed with antique lace and a long, long train, all 25 feet hand-embroidered. As bewitching and romantic a bride as ever touched the heart of the world. But that long train is a bridesmaid's nightmare. On her father's arm, Lady Diana Spencer sets off to join the prince of her heart. Her bouquet, orchids and pale gardenias, dark myrtle and golden Mountbatten roses. So Charles and Diana come together before God and the world to make their vows, each to the other. The service is to be taken by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Charles Philip Arthur George, wilt thou have this woman to thy wedded wife, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Wilt thou love her, comfort her, honor and keep her in sickness and in health, and forsaking all other, keep thee only unto her, so long as ye both shall live?
I will.
Diana Francis, wilt thou have this man to thy wedded husband, to live together according to God's law in the holy estate of matrimony? Wilt thou love him, comfort him, honor and keep him in sickness and in health, and forsaking all other, keep thee only unto him, so long as ye both shall live?
I will.
Who giveth this woman to be married to this man? I, Charles Philip Arthur George.
I, Charles Philip Arthur George.
Take thee, Diana Francis.
Take thee, Diana Francis.
To my wedded wife.
To my wedded wife.
To have and to hold from this day forward.
To have and to hold from this day forward.
For better, for worse.
For better, for worse.
For richer, for poorer.
For richer, for poorer.
In sickness and in health.
In sickness and in health.
To love and to cherish.
To love and to cherish.
Till death us do part.
Till death us do part.
According to God's holy law.
According to God's holy law.
And thereto I give thee my troth.
And thereto I give thee my troth.
I, Diana Francis.
I, Diana Francis.
Take thee, Charles Philip Arthur George.
Take thee, Philip Charles Arthur George.
To my wedded husband.
To my wedded husband.
To have and to hold.
To have and to hold.
From this day forward.
From this day forward.
For better, for worse.
For better, for worse.
For richer, for poorer.
For richer, for poorer.
in sickness and in health,
in sickness and in health,
to love and to cherish,
to love and to cherish,
till death us do part,
till death us do part,
according to God's holy law.
according to God's holy law.
And thereto I give thee my troth.
And thereto I give thee my troth.
There, he hadn't lost the ring after all.
With this ring
I
thee wed.
I thee wed.
With my body
With my body
I thee honor.
I thee honor.
And all my worldly goods with thee I share.
All thy goods with thee I share.
Let us pray.
And so the knot is tied.
Those whom God has joined together, let no man put asunder. For as much as Charles Philip Arthur George and Diana Francis have consented together in holy wedlock, and have witnessed the same before God and this company, and thereto have given and pledged their troth either to other, and have declared the same by giving and receiving of a ring and by joining of hands, I pronounce that they be man and wife together, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Charles and Diana, now man and wife, move up to the high altar for the blessing.
God, the Holy Trinity, make you strong in faith and love, defend you on every side, and guide you in truth and peace. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be amongst you and remain with you always.
Their Royal Highnesses, the Prince and Princess of Wales, make their way back down the aisle to the tumultuous welcome awaiting them at the steps of St. Paul's. And so, out into sunshine and bells and wild delight, as a palpable wave of affection and pride wells out from the crowd. Suddenly, that long train makes the state landau look remarkably full. As their families look on, with what emotions in their hearts. the Prince and Princess of Wales begin their first public journey, returning through the packed streets of London to Buckingham Palace. There are those who say that the monarchy has no relevance to modern British life. Obviously, a lot of people don't agree. Behind the newlyweds comes the Queen, accompanied by the Earl Spencer. The Duke of Edinburgh, with the bride's mother, Mrs. Shand Kidd. The Queen Mother with Prince Andrew. Who can doubt the love and happiness that this couple so obviously feel and share? So strong that for one inspiring day, a whole nation can forget its troubles to unite in wishing them well. The bridal carriage draws up at the grand entrance to Buckingham Palace, on as grand and happy a day as summer's sun looked down on. Lady Sarah straightens out a few last problems with that train. Close behind the bridal couple, the Queen's carriage procession arrives. The procession over, the crowd rushes for the traditional vantage point of the palace railings. Whilst behind a slender police cordon, the Mall fills with people like a thermometer fills with mercury. And this is what they're waiting for, an appearance on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, which has seen so many royal and national occasions in the past. Which receives a roar of approval from the crowd, who call the couple back and back again onto the balcony. It's hard to argue with 500,000 people who know what they want. Every single one was rewarded by this tender kiss. At last, photographs taken, wedding breakfast eaten, toast drunk, and after fond farewells, the young couple managed to get away on their honeymoon. Thoroughly unofficial addition to the 1902 state landau. Balloons decorated with the Prince of Wales feathers and a notice proclaiming "just married," in case anyone didn't know. It seems that princes of the blood or not, younger brothers are much the same everywhere. Queen Victoria may not have been amused, but everyone else was. It's obvious, even trite, to describe this tale of the beautiful maid who marries a handsome prince as a fairy story. It's certainly sentimental to do so. But what's wrong with that?